This is the story of West Air Sweden Flight 294. Flight 294 was a CRJ-900 that was transporting mail from the city of Oslo to the city of Tromsø in Sweden. Most cargo flights fly at night so that the destinations that they fly to can get their mail in the morning. Flight 294 was no exception. They planned to take off at 11 p.m. on the 8th of January 2016. The plane was fueled and ready. With no indication of bad weather, they assumed that they'd have a smooth flight. No rain, no icing, no wind. A perfect moonless night for flying. At 11:09 p.m., the plane took off and began a steady climb to 33,000 feet. Once at 33,000 feet, they reached Swedish airspace. Nearing Tromsø, they were told by ATC to expect runway 01 for the landing. The crew carried out their briefing and all appeared normal. At 12:19 a.m. and 20 seconds, as the pilots were going over the approach briefing, the captain notices that the artificial horizon shows the plane is starting to pitch up. The captain sees that the plane is pitching up by a degree, and then that increased to 1.7 degrees, and in the next 6 seconds, the displayed pitch increases to 6 degrees. When the captain sees that the displayed pitch is about 15 degrees, he exclaims, "What?" A warning sounds. The autopilot has been automatically disconnected. Acting instinctively, the pilot pushes the control column forward in order to recover the plane from the dangerously nose-high attitude that he thought the plane was in. He trims the plane to nose down gently, hoping that this would remedy the situation. As the airplane pitch angle reached 30 degrees, red arrows popped up on the pilot's primary flight display, and all non-pertinent information was removed from the display. The airplane began to descend fast. With the negative G's building up, the engines began to throw error messages at the pilots. The airplane began to roll, and the bank angle warnings blared. The co-pilot asked the captain, who was the one flying the plane at the time, to come up. He had realized that they were in a dangerous descent. He further asked the captain to turn right to counter the roll. The captain says, "Come on, help me, help me, help me." The plane, in its furious descent, reached Mach 0.85, the maximum speed that it was designed for. They still kept on descending, reaching Mach 0.91. They were closing in on the sound barrier. The co-pilot declares a mayday. They were now at 24,000 feet and descending fast. The crew were discussing ways to get out of the roll and to start climbing again. The co-pilot was asking the captain to turn left to counteract the roll, but the captain just replies with a no. Flight 294 rolled over inverted and it collided with the ground at 12:20 a.m. and 40 seconds. The silence of the dark Swedish night was shattered by the crash of Flight 294. The Norwegian controller contacted his Swedish equivalent to tell them about Flight 294. At 12:28 a.m., the Swedish controller alerted the Joint Rescue Coordination Center to find out more about the missing plane. The wreckage was eventually found at an elevation of 1,000 feet, 10 kilometers from the Norwegian border. The high-energy impact had destroyed the plane. The massive plane was nothing more than a few bits of metal fragments. They all had the same question. How did a plane flying at 33,000 feet suddenly nosedive into the ground? Listening to the CVR, they hear the captain, the pilot flying the plane, be surprised by something. They see that the captain's artificial horizon shows the plane with a slight nose-up attitude. This is what surprised the captain. Then they find something shocking. The captain's PFD, or primary flight display, was displaying incorrect information. The plane had been level all along. He was the one that pushed the plane into a dive. But why didn't he realize what he was doing? When the captain saw the attitude indicator going up, they were preparing for landing, which means that the cockpit was well lit. This may have impeded with their abilities to scan outside of the aircraft for visual cues. Moreover, it was a dark night, and it would have been hard to see anything out of the cockpit. The autopilot is disconnected at this time due to the two artificial horizons disagreeing. the co-pilot's artificial horizon was working. In this aircraft, when a flight parameter on the PFD disagrees with the data from the other PFD, the data in question is highlighted on the display in amber so as to draw the pilot's attention to it. But once the plane's displayed attitude passed a certain threshold, the PFD by design declutters, meaning that all non-pertinent information from the PFD is removed. In this case, the amber indicators indicating that the two artificial horizons were disagreeing was cleared away, and now the pilot had no visual cue to know that his plane was not in fact in the dangerous position that he thought it was. Pilots are taught to act swiftly in situations like this. The captain's training taught him to push the nose down, and that's exactly what he did. It's at this point that the communication between the pilots started to break down. Both pilots, I assume, had a very different picture of the situation. The captain thought that the plane was pitching up, and he was in that frame of mind. The co-pilot, on the other hand, was working on the approach checklist, and he suddenly realized that the plane was beginning to descend, and he was in that frame of mind. When the plane began to blare warnings due to ineffective communication between the pilots, they both wanted to do completely different things, and that added to the confusion in the cockpit. The captain was pushing down on the control column, and they were now descending, and now the co-pilot's artificial horizon goes into declutter mode. Now, they had two artificial horizons telling them two different things, but the crew never really discussed this. The co-pilot yells out roll directions to save the plane, but nothing seems to work. The captain is still acting based on his own artificial horizon. The plane continues to pick up speed. It hits Mach 0.90 in a 40-degree nose-down dive. The possibility of them recovering from such a serious descent is now slim, and their fate has been sealed. The roll of the airplane kept getting worse and worse, and before long, the plane was inverted. With no mental picture of how the plane was acting, or accurate flight parameter readings for the captain, they didn't have a chance to save the airplane, and Flight 294 crashed. The flight could have been saved had it been for the amber disagree warnings, but those warnings were cleared away from the primary flight display when the plane started to pitch down at a dangerous angle. Had they been available for longer, it's possible that the crew might have realized that the captain's data was corrupted and evasive actions could have been taken. But why had the captain's instruments misled him? The only explanations that the investigators could come up with was that the plane's number 1 IRU, or inertial reference unit, malfunctioned. The IRU senses and measures the acceleration on all three axes of the airplane. So that means that if the plane pitches or rolls, the IRU detects and measures it, so the pilots can see it on their displays. But they could not find another instance of the IRU failing like this. Initially, only the pitch reading was corrupted, but when the plane began to roll, the roll data was also corrupted, as the computer needed both pitch and roll gyroscopes in the IRU to determine the attitude of the plane. The crew of Flight 294 was never in any real danger. Had they realized that they were being fed false information from the beginning, all of this could have been avoided. This crash illustrates the need for good communication and presence of mind in the cockpit. Thank you for watching this episode of Mini Air Crash Investigation. If you like the videos that I make, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. I'd like to thank Westjet Aviation for letting me use his amazing videos on my video. I'll see you guys next time.